Welcome to the Blogger Genius Podcast, brought to you by MiloTree. Here's your host, Jillian Leslie.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Jillian Leslie. I'm founder of Catch My Party, the MiloTree app. I'm a business coach, and as I like to call myself, a business translator. I take what is working right now in online business and I break it down so you can use these strategies yourself. Before I get started, I wanted to share a review of the MiloTree Pinterest pop-up that Brianne Huntsman sent to me. She's the blogger behind the Huntswoman blog, and she wrote, "I have seen an incredible increase in my Pinterest followers thanks to MiloTree. I joined in September of 2020, and I've seen about 100 new Pinterest followers a month. Before MiloTree, I'd been getting maybe 10 to 20 a month. I started with 730 Pinterest followers, and today, February 17th, 2021, I have 1,159. I do recommend using the MiloTree pop-up to grow your Pinterest followers." Well, thank you, Brianne, for sharing that and sharing that data. And we all know Pinterest followers help get your pins found on Pinterest and drive more traffic to your blog. So head to MiloTree, sign up for your account. You get your first 30 days free. You can cancel at any time. So why not try it? Today, I have Jeff Hawley back on the show, otherwise known as #Jeff. This is his second appearance. He is an SEO expert. What is most interesting about this episode is we really talk about how SEO is much more of an art form than a science. There is nuance to creating blog posts that get found. Also, we talk about the algorithm update that Google is planning in May and what that might mean for you. You might want to grab a piece of paper and a pen. There are probably some good takeaways for you in this episode. So without further delay, here is my interview with Jeff Hawley. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's been a while. A lot has happened in the world since I was on last time.
Exactly. And yes, and it was nice having just a couple moments just to catch up with you because I haven't seen you in a while. And also it's funny, we were just talking about how, SEO really should be part of everything that you're doing. And that's kind of what we were going to focus on. So you had emailed me and you said that you wanted to talk about doing SEO with purpose. And I want to know what you really mean by that.
So this one's a hard one because I feel like over the years, people have been looking for these rules and these checklists around SEO. And I feel like that's kind of become ingrained. It's okay, I've got my blogging, I've got my social media, and then I've got SEO over here. Whereas I feel like it's kind of just another task, or it has become. And so it's kind of multifaceted as far as why I've been focusing so heavily on this. But my main thing is one, and I think you just said this just right before we got on, was incorporating SEO just into all of what we do. It's not just this other activity. And to be totally honest, SEO is not standalone. SEO does not exist without social media. It does not exist without content creation. It doesn't exist without users and readers and things like that. So SEO can never be it can't ever be just its own thing. SEO is just kind of an idea. These are signals that Google's looking at and they're going to be changing. So it's not its own thing. It's not like social media marketing where it's its own thing. It involves all this other stuff. And so the reason that I've been focusing so heavily on doing SEO with purpose, and what I mean by that, it's just, let's have another reason besides I'm doing this for SEO. There's a reason behind it. Google doesn't just come up with these rules to say, okay, we set the rules, this is how it's going to be. And it's kind of like me as a parent. Sometimes my kid asks me why can't I do this? And I'm just shut up, because I said so. Google's not creating these rules like that. There's an underlying purpose. There's a reason. And so that's what I like to focus on. And if you've heard me speak and other things, this is something I've been kind of preaching for quite a while. Now I'm just focusing on it very specifically is all. And then just kind of an extension on that, it's just like, it's also knowing when to break the rules. Like I have a lot of people that like, they're just like, these are the SEO rules. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? And they're just like, I don't know. I've just been doing it for so many years. Like it was recommended to me, and like question these rules, like know when to break them. Like it's like, okay, yes, this is a rule. Like for instance, site speed, we need to get our site speed up. And so maybe like my rule is that I have less than 3 or 4 images. But let's say that I have a post, like a how-to or a recipe or whatever it might be, where I'm just like, this is complicated and I need 15 images. Break that rule. Like, yes, that's going to compromise some site speed, but like, would you rather compromise some site speed or lack having an experience on the site or being able to help your user or reader accomplish what they came here to accomplish?
Well,
so like it's, yeah.
I was going to say that the advice today that I give to most bloggers is niche down, know your niche. However, if, for example, you want to write a post that's outside of your niche because it's meaningful to you, because it fleshes you out and maybe shows you in a different light, who knows why? I say go write that post. Now, should that be every single post, or should you every day wake up and blog about something different? No, but does niching down mean I could never write about, say, my children or my vacation or something I baked, or that is nothing to do with me being like an early childhood educator or whatever? Like, you know when to break the rules, know when you're doing it for another, like have guidelines, but they're just guidelines.
Well, and to your point, like blogging isn't just about organic traffic. It's also about audience building. And if audience building is going to be enhanced by you sharing a personal experience or, connecting with your audience, that's only going to bring that connection that you have with your audience closer. So yes, it doesn't have a direct tie to SEO, but at the same time, it's building your authority and your audience, which is going to help SEO and just overall marketing in general.
So if we were to talk about Google, and very much like you saying to your child, like just it's because Google does have a basic fundamental reason for what they're doing. And I would say, you could tell me if you agree with this, it's a good user experience for people coming to Google searching for things. Like that is their North Star. So if
Correct.
Your site is slow, if your images don't load quickly, if your content is all over the place, or it's not a full answer to a question somebody might have, Google's not going to like it because the searcher is not going to like it. And Google's job is to they want to be the place you go to when you've got a question. So it's like when all of a sudden you put that hat on and you see it through Google's eyes, it isn't Google being arbitrary and being like, I don't like you, Jeff, or Jillian, man, I just want to punish you. It's if you could serve up the best answer to a question, I like you because my user likes you and it's a good experience. And I think like again, for me, how you want to have purpose-driven SEO, I too am all about connecting the dots so things don't live on islands.
Correct. And to kind of extend on that, so you're 100% right. Google has this underlying purpose, and in almost every instance, it has to do with that user experience. I would say one of the other reasons that for these SEO rules is sometimes for Google or bot comprehension. And that's and so it's just basically, since it's a robot in a human's world, they can only go so far. And so some of these SEO rules we do for Google, but it's mostly for comprehension, context, helping them understand what these things are. And sometimes that's where structured data comes in and some of these other things. But like you said, in almost every instance, there's an underlying user experience reason. If not, then we're doing it to help Google better understand content, structure, those things.
And so that keeps coming up, structured data. When I first started learning about it, it was things like when recipe cards for food bloggers came out, and my understanding, and recipe cards, as people know, are those kind of blocks in a perfect example in a food blogger's post where it says print Print to get the recipe is really the recipe card. And it's like the self-contained recipe within your blog post. Because before, like we used to just kind of put a recipe kind of all over the place in our blog post. And it's a way to, again, structure the post so you know where the recipe is. And by filling in those fields, you're telling Google can read the recipe card. So when it says ingredients, Google understands, oh, those are the ingredients. Or cook time, Google understands when you fill in the field that says cook time, Google knows what that means. So recipe card was really the first example that I remember of using structured data, understanding that it was like a pipeline directly to Google, saying, Google, you want to know, the ingredients? Boom. You want to know the directions? Boom. You want to know this. And it's almost like I'm feeding it, spoon feeding it to Google. And now I feel like structured data has expanded for the normal blogger. So if you're doing, say, DIY posts, you might want to use like a recipe plugin or like the Yoast has those kind of blocks where you can now start to tell Google what is going on. So am I right? And can you elaborate on that?
So to kind of just put it as simply as possible, think of structured, so Google has gotten really good at what they do. Like in a lot of cases, they'll just look at a page and identify, Google could probably identify, if you have a recipe on a page, they probably are smart enough to identify ingredients, time, things like that. So you think of it as they're maximizing their confidence rate in what they're actually displaying. So yes, they can kind of interpret things in their own, but there's still going to be a degree of error there. Whereas us implementing structured data, that's clarifying this and saying, hey, Google, or just search engines, this is a recipe for food, and here's ingredients, time, all these things, image, video, all these, so that they can utilize them so that when somebody is searching for that with a higher degree of confidence, now they can interpret it. The other part of that is also we're going into, so search results have always been kind of this pack. And in the SEO world, a lot of times we call them a 10 pack, things like that, to where it's on page one. If I ask a question if I type in a question on Google, I may get some options when in a normal search. We switch that over to voice search or Google Homes or things like that. We only get one result. So Google has to have a higher degree of confidence in answering those questions. And this is where structured data also comes into play, is they have one shot now. And otherwise, it's going to be a bad experience. Whereas there's a degree of a margin for error that they can have with a 10 pack, because if they get one or two that's not exactly right, or if they want to give a variety, they can, and they can take a little bit more chance. But when they have one result that they can share, you can't really do that as easily. So again, this is where it's in your best interest. You don't have to do it, but it's in your best interest to learn the structured data and apply it whenever necessary. Recipe cards is one of the must-haves. If you're a food blogger, you will not survive with SEO without a recipe card and structured data there. Other industries, it's not quite as hard and fast in most other spaces. DIY and how-to, I think we'll get a little bit more of that, but yeah, for the most part, it's to enhance these search results and give Google more information so that they can enhance the search results and we can stand out a little bit more.
But let's talk about then some other use cases and how, let's say I'm a craft blog and I come up with crafts. What do you recommend I do to give Google some structured data? And then let's say I'm just a kind of like a parenting blog and I have advice. How can I start to feed Google my content in a more structured format?
Yeah, so some of the general structured data items are going to be just in article structured data. If you're on WordPress, I'd use Yoast. Yoast will help you implement that. Very simply, you just basically input your logo and things in the settings. Another one would be breadcrumbs. Yoast can also help with this. The how-to stuff. So if you're DIY, if you're how to tie a shoe.
Sorry. What do you mean by breadcrumbs?
Oh, sorry. So breadcrumbs, those things at the top of your page to where it's it kind of shows you category and kind of shows you topic to give you context as to what, so these breadcrumbs are a hierarchy thing that help with site structure.
Right. So you could see it will have a larger topic and then like almost like an arrow, and it'll kind of go down to like the next category, like the
See them a
next.
lot on e-commerce stores too. Like if I'm on like a shoe, I may see women's shoes and then
Sandals.
yeah, things like that. So then you'll kind of see this hierarchy or flow, and you can display breadcrumbs, and those are just the links. You can display breadcrumbs with or without structured data even. So they're kind of separate. You can even have structured data for breadcrumbs without displaying the breadcrumbs visibly. I don't necessarily recommend that, but there are cases where that is the case. But in search results, you'll also see it. So if you go next time you're searching, when you like are searching for just, I don't know, something, sometimes you'll see the breadcrumbs there next to the URL to where it'll say, like you'll see almost topics, and you can even click on those in search results. So Google is providing context, I think, for them, but also to the user. So if I'm like searching something and I see like something Nike, like some sort of like Nike brand, I may see under it like women's shoe or men's shoe or basketball or something like that. That's going to give me context as to what, topic that kind of fits in.
And how do I set those up on my blog?
Yeah, so Yoast is another one. So Yoast has some documentation on how to do it. So if you just go Google search Yoast breadcrumbs, you'll have top article will be most likely that, and it'll show you how to implement breadcrumbs with Yoast.
Okay.
There is some technical. So if you have like a dev or tech person, I do probably recommend doing that, because the other part of it is just making them look nice. Sometimes just out of the box, they just kind of look blocky and chunky and makes your site feel a little bit dated because it may not be, but like you can stylize them and stuff. So, but there's a DIY guide. So Yoast has that. I think Genesis, if you're on a Genesis theme, sometimes they have things already built in. Those are the two most popular routes that you can go.
And Yoast,
when in doubt, you can always do like you can, like a lot of times, like for finding documentation, I'll type in breadcrumbs, Google structured data, and I'll go look at Google's documentation because it's really just code on the back end that is just this language. Yoast just makes it easier to do.
Got it. And Yoast has some Gutenberg blocks, like they have a how-to block. And would you recommend, if I'm doing any sort of how-to, to use that block to put my data in, my information in?
Yeah. So the two routes that I would go are either Yoast with the Gutenberg blocks. That being said, WP Recipe Maker, which is one of the top like recipe card plugins, has like it's been a little bit more effective in being more customizable and like other things like that. Whereas Yoast has sometimes been a little bit behind on updating all the features there. So we've actually preferred WP Recipe Maker over Yoast because when it comes to recipe cards or recipe structured data actually has an element of how-to structured data. Like there's some overlap there, which makes it really easy for them to solve that problem.
Yes, that is great. And I think there will be more blur ultimately between recipe cards and DIY cards and things that have instructions like how-tos. And so other things that you can do for structured data would be like frequently asked questions or using your headings. Isn't that right? Like that Google will read your headings and go, oh, this is a heading. So this must be like a top kind of category. And then underneath it, it will probably give more information about what that heading is. And so would you say that's structured data?
I wouldn't say that's structured data. That would just be more like HTML elements and things. So like that's where like the H1, H2, H3. So that would just be best practices in HTML and things like that. I wouldn't consider that structured data. Google does understand that. And like, they'll interpret that. But there's not really a structured data type for that. That would just be more of an HTML element, I think is the appropriate term to call that. But yeah, it wouldn't be a structured data element. The other structured data, kind of beyond what we've already talked about, would be like reviews. So we see this a lot in like recipe and food blogs, but like as people leave comments, they'll also rate the recipe. So that'd be more of an aggregate user review. If you're doing a review like as a writer or as an author on something like, so like going back to the shoe example, like if I was reviewing a certain type of shoe, I could do a critic review. And so again, like there's plugins for that. I don't know them off the top of my head. But yeah, there's a few plugins that do that. I wouldn't say that there's like one that just blows everybody out of the water like Yoast or WPRS Maker does. But there are various ones that do it for some of those other ones. Those are probably the more popular ones, like at least in the blogging and publishing world. There's others outside, like local businesses and a bunch of others. So so it kind of depends. Like the best way to identify whether or not you should be implementing more structured data is if you're doing searches for topics and terms that you're trying to rank for. And if you see features and things like that, then it should just kind of come in just like, okay, like let's question that. Like, is that done by structured data or is Google just doing that? And so recipes, you'll see the recipe cards and like the boxes and things like that. That's structured data. The reviews, if you see like the yellow star counts, those are the review structured data. So yeah, so that's the best way to identify, okay, like, do I need structured data? Like, and things like that. Like the parenting one you recommended, there's general ones like the breadcrumbs and things, but overall there's not a whole lot that you really need there.
And are you saying when I search for, let's say, I search for something that I want to write about, are you saying that I can see the structured data in the search results or ultimately when I click through to that blog?
So structured data, Google will interpret that. So if you see rich snippets, so anything beyond just
in
a
the
link
search result.
Yeah, in the search result, like if you see something visual that's different, that's usually done through structured data. There are some exceptions, but a lot of times it's structured data.
Okay, so now we've talked about this now. There's an update coming in May, and it's called, let's see, it's called the Google like user experience update or something like that. And you and I were talking about it beforehand, and we were saying that a lot of what's potentially in that update is just best practices for SEO. So can you just share like what you know or what Google has said about this and how not to freak out about it, but how to do kind of best practices for your blog so that when this happens, it won't be a big shock for anybody?
Yeah. So this is, user experience, the core, another name that people might like hear is like core web vitals. That's another term that is, page experience. Like these are all things that are being used for this. The hard part I have right now, and one of the reasons I haven't like really come out and said, okay, this is what you need to do is for a couple of reasons. We just talked about this just before we hopped on and started recording. But one, it's, I don't want to overplay or underplay what this means. Like, I don't want to come out and say, don't worry, and then it be a little bit more than expected. I also don't want to like freak anybody out and like cause panic because, truthfully, I really don't think there is anything to panic about. Like, again, like focusing on site speed, focusing on user experience, like, where do you sit? Like, quit focusing on just like the metrics that just like, okay, this tech person said I need to get above this score. Like, sometimes the scores are not always representative. Like it's just kind of, it's tools trying to recreate this. And so we kind of want to, we look at those, but we also want to kind of pay attention to what they mean. Ultimately, Google is going to try to make sure, like, because they don't want to just cut our legs out from underneath us. Like, they're going to do everything. And that's why I don't think that this is just an end of the world sort of update. I really think that they're going to try to do their best at, like, again, like, what are we focusing on? It's user experience. Does your site load fast? After it starts to load, is there a lot of things moving around? A lot of times we see that like as ads load, as a pop-up loads, as images above the fold load. What is the perceived user experience on the site like? And so focus on these things, like focus on your email opt-ins. I've even talked to some developers, and some custom fonts actually affect this. And so go and kind of find out, like, ask questions, because I don't have a list of fonts just yet. I'm going to get some. That way I kind of have a list. Well, but I know that some of those fonts.
David we set up people's WordPress blogs. Mm-hmm. And there's always this tension between people who want their blogs to look beautiful and making sure your blog loads really quickly. And a lot right now, a lot of our experience is on mobile. So people get really hung up on what their theme looks like and hiring, let's say, some designer to personalize our theme. And David and I go, no, you don't need to do that. Like, you need to focus on the mobile user experience. But a lot of your theme doesn't really look like anything on mobile. It just needs to be accessible, and it needs to put your content up front and have people be able to interact with your content really easily, but let all the other stuff fall to the kind of to the background, like your fonts. People get like, they have like, I don't know, 17 different fonts, and David's like, you need 1 to 2 fonts and you're good to go. Nobody has ever, I'm sure, gone to your blog and said, you have such simple fonts, I don't think I could stay here on this site. Or, oh my God, you have the most beautiful fonts. I love this. It has no relevance to my life, but I'm going to read this every day because your fonts are so beautiful. Like, if you think about it from a user point of view, I don't even notice people's fonts.
I think it also depends on like what niche like you might be in. I think for the most part, like things that I'm assuming based on your audience and my audience, like I think for the most part, I would agree. There's probably some like especially like in the designer world where yes, that, and this is where we talked about like know when to break the rules. Is just like when it matters, yes, like okay, that actually matters. Like if I'm a blog about typography and like design and things like that, I may want to just compromise that because I'm like, you know what, like I have a bunch of typography snobs in here, and so it does matter. And so like, but yes, like you're exactly right. Like, I mean, we need to kind of look at this, but I mean, if it doesn't matter, that's where, I mean, I'm going to opt to go with the more common font, more simple font. Yes, it may not have as much of a wow or like, you know, like things like that, but that might actually be a good thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And just think about when your audience, because you were talking about you want to build authority, you want to build a community. What are people saying to you? Are they commenting on your fonts? Are they commenting on the beauty of your theme? Or are they really commenting on the content you're putting out? And therefore, I mean, that would be one of those things where we would say, honestly, you do not have to worry. We were talking today, David and I, about a logo. Mm-hmm. And David said, I think people care too much about their logos. And if you could do a simple logo that's just potentially text, you're 9/10 of the way there. Like the difference between hiring somebody to design something really beautiful that might be not easy to read, but looks really good, versus something that's easy to read, potentially memorable. Like really think about the decisions that you're making, and is there a way to make a faster decision, maybe as one that isn't as beautiful but could move you along in this process quicker, that could get people to get into your content faster, those kinds of things. Like really think about where to prioritize. I wanted to take a quick break to ask you one question. Have you signed up for MiloTree yet? If the answer is no, please pause the episode, head to MiloTree.com, sign up for your account, install it on your blog in 2 minutes, and then come on back and listen to the end of the episode. So here we go. Pause. And now we're back. Here is part 2 of the episode.
And I mean, going back to kind of the main reason for this topic, like the Google page experience, like I would focus on 2 things. Like one is speed in general, like performance, like how does it feel? Like, I mean, yeah, like everyone's gonna have their design preferences, but like, I think that you'll always have options. I would just kind of opt to, like, if your font is one of those that's kind of slowing things down, I mean, maybe look at something else. You still have options, but like speed and performance, how things load and things like that, but also as things are loading, what happens after the fact. And this is where we call it, like, it's the cumulative layout shift. So CLS. So any shift that happens after it's starting to load. And a lot of times this is visual. Like you can go onto your site, like go view your site as if you're a user, and you'll notice it. Like it's this perceived shift that happens. So that, like, how annoying is it when you start to load and you start to go like click something and a video loads right there? Or as you're starting to go do something, like, I mean, it shifts and it's just like, I clicked on that ad on accident. Like these are the things that Google's trying to accomplish. Like, so again, instead of focusing just on the scores, it's like, this is what we're trying to focus on, is this the real experience that's going on.
I always recommend, tell me what you think about this. Whenever you post something, whenever you publish a blog post, typically we work
100%.
on, what'd you say?
I said 100%. I know where you're going.
I love it. But go look at that post immediately on mobile.
Yes.
Because personally, I fall for this trap I work on this enormous Mac. So my view of the world is very different, but in terms of content creation, than when I consume content on my phone, and always going to your phone and going, well, what does this even look like? How does it feel on my phone? Because it feels really different on my desktop. And I think getting into that habit is really beneficial. And especially because a lot of these changes in what Google is saying, I think, is based on mobile, because that's where we are consuming most of our content.
Oh, 100%. I 100% agree with that. I think that's one thing I think a lot of times we overlook as creators, because like you said, we're on our desktop creating this, or on a laptop creating this. Like, we're not creating this on mobile in most cases, I don't think. At least we probably shouldn't be. But like, once we have that published, I do think that we need to do more of just, let's go look at our site as if we're a user. What's going on? What's happening? Like, the big thing I see is, like, a lot of times, like, an ad will show up and it'll break the content. Like, whereas it's not your ad network's fault. A lot of times it's just a simple fix to where you can put an extra space or something like that. But that's how you're going to know whether, like, there's really an effect or not, or if there's like this post is different and you're just like, oh, like, these types of ads don't work. So, like, I mean, your ad network will work with you to where, okay, like, maybe we disable this size or this layout of ad or something like that. But you won't know unless you're in there looking at it.
So could we talk about authority and how Google thinks about, like, what does authority in Google's eyes mean, and how do I think about building my authority?
Yeah. So think of expertise as your resume. Like, this is what you have. Like, these are your qualifications, even things like what you're saying about yourself. So, like, that's you showing your expertise. Your authority is built by what others are saying and what others are doing, or the effects. And the analogy that I've been, I need to put together a video or something like that, because I keep sharing this, but I've kind of been just imagine, like, just like tossing like a pebble in a still body of water. And it's just like, okay, I throw this little pebble, like, it's not, the pebble is what we do, but it's like these ripples that Google's paying attention to. And so, like, we need to figure out how to affect those ripples more so that we have bigger ripples. They go out farther, so they're more frequent. And like, a lot of times that's where this authority is derived. And so authority can be derived from, this is where backlinks come in. So, like, people linking to our site, authority can be driven. And it's not all about backlinks. I know SEO is kind of connected to building backlinks, but social drives a lot of this authority to where, like, especially like food and DIY and things like that. Like, Google knows that, just like, okay, like, I don't really care what others are saying about you. Like, because where the real value is, like, where people go when they're looking for recipes or how to, or things like that, it's just like Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram. And so it's just like, okay, like, what are the signals that have been created here, and things like that. We also, things that we don't often think about, are like, Google owns browsers, they own email. Like, these are things that they can pay attention to still. They have a lot of data. So, like, how good are we at email marketing? Like, how good are we at creating resources that people are bookmarking in their browsers? Like, these are all authority signals. Obviously the things that we can see are like backlinks and other things, but it's these ripples that we're creating out on the web.
So explain that, if you would, how email marketing, because you're right, like, I use Gmail for everything. And so Google's paying attention to that?
So it's hard to confirm, like, but a lot of times when I do like SEO, or just, not even SEO, it's like marketing in general. I'm like, okay, like, what would be the benefit of having a strong email or like whatever campaign? It's like, okay, like, if I get people to share these things towards, like, people are forwarding emails. I know that's kind of an archaic thing nowadays, but people still do it. Like even me and my wife, like, I mean, we forward emails all the time. So it still occurs. And I mean, if Google sees it, like, I think that these are like signals that, I mean, Google can obviously see. The other thing is, like, even if they're not looking at that specifically, like, you're giving your content more of a chance, so that if I see something in an email, even if I go and share it on Pinterest, like, the more visibility you have on your content, the more chances and opportunities that it's going to get shared. And again, these are these ripples. And so the more that you can affect these ripples, so that, like, again, so it's not just you moving the water and creating these ripples every single time. If you can create these to where, like, these ripples, like, becomes kind of an ocean to where it's like, okay, like, now, like, just the rotation and all this stuff, like, I mean, are creating these waves, like, that's what we want. And that's going to be created by our users, our followers, our audience, other peers, things like that. This is where this authority is kind of driven from.
Do you think does it make you believe in karma?
I mean, I do. I'm kind of I believe in karma to an extent, but I'm like a make your own luck sort of thing. Like, I mean,
but I mean, don't you think though that you put out, you're not trying to say cheat the system. You really want to help your users, and you put out good information and kindness and honesty and integrity, and that people can smell that, and they are more apt to go, hey, I trust Jeff. I want to share this because Jeff is my guy, and I know, like, and trust you, and therefore you make me look good if I share your stuff and all of that. And so I believe as an online entrepreneur, karma is real, just because you're living in these kind of universes, and you might know people who are in your space, and I think the more authentic and the more helpful you are, the more that comes back to you. That's just my belief in the world, you know?
Well, and I think you can look at it as karma. You can also look at it as, like, again, like you said, like, being helpful. Like, so, I mean, if you're solving a problem and helping, like, people naturally want to share that. So if you have good quality content, whether it be for entertainment or solving a problem or how to, like, whatever that might be, it's value. And if you can create that value is going to get shared. And so, like, that's where, I mean, covering your bases, I mean, having a good, I mean, you're not going to be good at everything, but, like, I mean, you can get better at certain things. And if you're not good at it, I mean, that's where you can start to kind of build on it. But these are the things that build this authority. And so you want to give your content as much of a chance as possible. And the more visibility you get on that, the more chances you're going to get at, I mean, getting that content shared because you solved somebody's problem or karma or however you want to look at it, you know?
Yes. Well, I have to say that one way that you impacted my life as a blogger was I was at a conference and you were teaching SEO, and you really opened my eyes to republishing older content, going in and making that content better. Like, that was one of those brain exploding moments. You changed our strategy completely. So Catch My Party, we were doing all this new content, and now we go back and we revisit posts that are doing well for us but could maybe need a boost, and all of that was because of you. And I continue to preach that you're kind of like a library of content, and you want to kind of take the books out, dust them off, maybe, buy the newest edition and put them back in your library. And it isn't just this race to make new content. It's really to just make better content. And can you speak to that? Because that was I remember calling my assistant that night and kind of staying up late that night with the wheels turning and going, oh my God, this changes everything. So will you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a holistic effort. I mean, like I think that a lot of times, and I think this stems from blogging being like the original social media, to where it's like, okay, it's blog
Tuesday.
with kind of like, yeah, it's Tuesday. It's a journal entry.
Yeah.
Like, blogging is not that. Like, blogging, like, where blogging was like you have an online journal or being an influencer, that shifted to social media. Like, so like we really kind of need to put that away. Like, and I mean, that's what we do. That's what we're on Facebook. That's what stories are for, Instagram, all this stuff. Our site is now a resource. And so, like you said, like, it's this library. We need to make sure that we maintain our library. as best as possible. It's not going to be perfect. Like every once in a while, we're going to find cobwebs over in the corner, but like as best as possible. And I mean, when we're looking at like publishing content, and I use food as an example in a lot of things, mostly just because it's easier for me to connect to food because everybody
loves
eats.
food. Yes.
So it's not because I love food bloggers more or anything like that. It's just, it's a topic that I can more, I'm simple-minded in a lot of ways. So like I can connect to it more easily, but like, I mean, I think a lot of times people are just like, like my audience wants new. If I have a really good chocolate cake recipe, like they're not going to be pissed off at me for sharing that again. Like they're just like, oh, you just shared this 2.5 years ago.
We know we're onto you. Yeah.
Right. Like we already do this in social. I mean, nobody has a problem. Like at least the influencers and bloggers I've talked to, like, I mean, we already do it on Pinterest. Like we're repinning, like we're resharing, like on all these social networks. Like how is our site any different? Really the value there is we're surfacing it. Like we're just like, we're reminding people, hey, this is here, this is relevant. And so if your timing is good, like you're just like, okay, like when is chocolate cake relevant or whatever? Like, I mean, right now is relevant. I mean, we're coming up on Valentine's Day and you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, okay, like when are these things relevant? Let's surface it. Because again, like, even though I may have known that you had chocolate cake, like, I mean, you being an influencer, like influencing my life or like, I mean, being the expert, it's just like, oh, like, yeah, like, and now you've solved a problem without even me having to go search for it. Like, I mean, that's really good, like as far as like on the social, the influence and things like that, but that's going to amplify all of those signals that we just talked about, like those ripples that we just talked about. So that's where republishing, like, don't let your content be forgotten. Like, don't let it stagnate. Like, I mean, you can improve it and things like that. Like, I mean, you may not always have to update it, but like refreshing and just making sure that it's current, but even republishing without like a lot of update, if it does need it, is very beneficial because it's surfacing that to the top of your site. You're also remarketing it and pushing it through your marketing channels and all that stuff.
Oh, that's interesting. So what I hear you say is you don't have to take that chocolate cake from 2.5 years ago, open up that post and like rejigger everything. You don't need to go rewrite a ton of new content or remake it so you have new photos. That you're saying you can just kind of clean it up a little bit and republish it and then use social to push it to your different channels.
Absolutely. So like in most cases, it's like, okay, like I probably need to add a little bit more content because like for most people nowadays, like it's just like 2-3 years ago, it was like, I have things that I can improve. So like things like that, but there is a scenario to where like, let's say that we're just like, okay, today, and then fast forward 2 or 3 years. Like, let's say that I'm writing my posts as they should, like I'm writing really good content, like in 2 or 3 years, like I may not have changed like that. Like, it's just like, okay, like it's good. Like maybe I need a new photo or something like that, depending on styles and things. But like, for the most part, like I mean, I don't want to say that like give people an excuse not to update it because you absolutely should. If there's an opportunity to update, you absolutely should. But in a perfect scenario to where like, let's say that it is perfect, there is a scenario to where it's just like, I don't have anything to change on this. I'm just going to republish it and push it through my channels.
I love that. And maybe it's, I make a video, and add a video. Like that's.
Don't do it just for SEO though. Like this is like kind of goes back to our original point was like, there's a bigger picture here. And so it's just like, okay, well, the rules say like, no. Like you're not republishing for SEO. Yes, SEO can be a benefit, but you're republishing because you know what, you have a chocolate cake recipe and you're just like, this is what my audience wants. And so you're publishing for your audience. And yes, another benefit is that it's going to amplify signals so that hopefully you're ranking better and getting more traffic. But also when somebody searches, because you know it's going to be relevant, when somebody searches for it, and if they see that it's current and things like that, when it surfaces in search results, that's another point in your corner saying, oh, okay, like click on, they just updated this or it's refreshed. So there's these bigger pictures rather than just saying, I'm doing this for Google, I'm doing this for SEO, I'm doing this for rankings.
I think that
those
is
are the
really,
effects, not the reasons.
I think that's really powerful. Okay. Just quickly, if we were to think about Google Analytics, Google Search Console, what is my use case for each? What do you go to Google Analytics predominantly to learn? What do you go to Search Console predominantly to learn about your blog?
Yeah, so analytics, you can think of it as, analytics, but it's, it's metrics on your site. Like you're assessing, like, performance, things like that. Like You're seeing traffic and where it's coming from, where it's going to. Like, it's bigger, like as far as like purpose and things like that. Think of Search Console in two ways. One, it being a communication tool for Google with you. So if there are issues, they can communicate that, and they'll likely communicate that through Google Search Console. The other thing, Google Search Console, because like there is some overlap with analytics to where you can see like performance, like impressions and clicks and all that stuff. But the other like main reason I would say look at Search Console is like finding issues, like technical or other things like that. Again, it goes back to it's a communication tool. There is an aspect of analytics, but that's really where it lies. I would say that I don't know that I can say I use one more than the other. They're very different. A lot of times when I'm trying to figure out something like an issue, I go to Search Console. If I'm looking at how things perform or not perform, which can also be an issue, I go to analytics. So either way, those are like you want to be, I don't want to say you have to be like proficient, but you should be confident enough. It's like my mom in computers, and it's just like, dude, at some point you have to just, even if it's just email and like to do like FaceTime with your kids or whatever, it comes a point of like, at least learn it. You don't have to be a computer whiz. Same thing, Google Search Console and analytics, it's in your best interest. So at least learn the basics.
And make sure you have Search Console set up. Usually people have Google Analytics. If you don't, you can reach out to us and we can help you to make sure that you have Search Console. So if you have a post with broken links, for example, Google will let you know in Search Console, which is really important to know. And also Search Console will show you keywords that you're ranking for, which I find really interesting. There will be a keyword that we're ranking for that we don't even have content around. And what that says to me is ding, 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 go make that content because you're already ranking for this. So you can like increase your rank for that keyword if you actually have a post around it. It's a great way, I think, to find the holes in your content.
Correct. Yep. And that was one area I didn't cover in that. Yeah. And that's where like the analytics come into play, is like, you'll be able to see clicks, impressions, but yeah, like keywords, like you said, to see, low hanging opportunities. Like you might find keywords that you are ranking for that you didn't realize, or vice versa. Keywords that you said you're surfacing for, but maybe you're not as relevant for. And so now you need to create content that maybe is a little bit more specific to that.
Absolutely. Okay. So your favorite keyword research tool?
So I've learned that I have to separate this out. If you're a bigger site, either like based on URLs or whatever, and you've been around a while, I'd recommend something like SEMrush or Ahrefs. It's a bigger tool. It has a lot more features than just keyword research. If you are a smaller site, like whether it be newer or you've only been around like a couple of years and things like that, or don't have a ton of content, just a straightforward keyword research tool is probably all you need. And that's where like Keyword Finder or keywordtool.io are two that I'd probably recommend. But yeah, those would be what I'd recommend as far as like basic SEO tools.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, because sometimes I feel like SEMrush or SEMrush is almost overwhelming. It's too much. I've signed up for it, canceled, signed up for it, canceled, just because I'm not necessarily using it. But it is incredibly powerful. I feel like David, my husband and partner, likes it a lot more than I do. I do like top level stuff
for marketers. Like it really is, and that's why I go more toward. And I used to say SEMrush too, and that's
tell me.
Technically the right way to do it. But for marketing purposes, they came out and clarified that they're going towards SEMrush. And I think that's just because it flows off the tongue better.
Interesting.
But
okay.
Among SEOs, it's still an argument.
Okay. I like that.
But anyways, so I have a lot of like trainings and things like that, and like courses and like other things that I have. And I like really like what I try to tell people is like, just put blinders on when you're in there. Like if you're not like a marketer or a technical person, just put blinders on there. There's like 3 areas that you just need to focus on. And that's what I focus on like in the course and stuff. It's keyword research. So they have a keyword magic tool. It's organic research, seeing what your site ranks for or other sites. And so those are the 2 main ones. And then the third one would be just rank tracking. And so that you can track keyword rankings and stuff. Other than that, honestly, I don't use anything else in there. There's a lot of bells and whistles and shiny objects, But if I'm being honest, I really don't use anything else.
That makes me feel much better about myself, because I was feeling very inadequate, that there was all of this power in this tool and I wasn't using it. So, that makes
power
me
is in those 3 features.
Okay,
they have other
good.
things.
That's really good to know.
And they even have other features that they like market heavily, and that I just haven't gotten totally behind yet. But those are the 3 that, and I just put blinders on. That's all I'm constantly just navigating those. I very rarely ever go outside of that.
Oh, I think that's great. Okay, Jeff, this was so delightful. I like your SEO energy because you're so chill about it. You're kind of like, go make smart choices and and you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that, because I think there can be a lot of emotion around Google and around all algorithms. When people go, the Facebook algorithm has changed, or all these things. And I think it is about at its most basic, serving your audience.
Yes. I honestly, I feel like SEO, just Google in general. We may swear Google and curse its name and all this other stuff, but it's not like the other platforms. It's not like Facebook is self-indulgent, and they can do that without being penalized or without having repercussions. Google kind of has to follow a general, I don't want to say integrity or whatever, but if they start to have a poor user experience, again, they may not serve publishers quite as frequently, but they're always going to serve the user. And if they stop serving the user, people are going to go elsewhere. And the reason that Google has held such a strong hold on that market is because they've always focused on that user. And so that's the one thing I love about Google. And even as frustrating as it is, it's not going to just change overnight. Sometimes we think the Google updates are, it's not going to change overnight like Facebook and things like in a blink of an eye, you can lose all of Facebook or Pinterest and things like that. And you may not ever recover. At least with Google, you understand what you need to do to recover. And if you don't, reach out.
I love that. So Jeff, if people want to reach out, have questions, want to take your SEMrush course, how can they do that?
Just remember #Jeff, spelled out, not with the hashtag symbol, but you can either reach out to us via email, hello@#jeff.com, go to our site. I'm on social media on all of those, same handle at #Jeff. I do have a course. I highly recommend it. In December, we actually moved to a new platform. And it's less of a course and more of a community now. We're straddling it. But the thing that we've loved is we're also off of Facebook now. And I honestly, for my own personal health, mental health, whatever, it's much better. We have a community that, people can rely on and we control and things like that. And it's now a lot more open. So it's more discussion. We have the trainings, but it's a lot more discussion in there. So.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I hope you guys liked this episode. Did you take notes? For me, my biggest takeaway is knowing when to follow the rules and knowing when to break the rules. Also, to not be afraid of the new Google algorithm change. Before I go, I have a favor to ask. If you are enjoying the podcast, please head to iTunes, give it 5 stars, and write a really short review. This helps get it found, and I can continue to get great guests. And I will see you here again next week.